There is so much to unpack this episode of Prodigal Son. Martin and Malcolm, Jessica and Ainsley. So without wasting any more time, let's get to it. Prodigal Son, episode 14, Eye of the Needle. The episode starts with a flashback of Martin and Malcolm talking about the changing MOs of serial killers. Martin talks about how he'd like to experiment and improvise. Malcolm asks if Martin was to kill him right now, how would he do it? Martin answers it in the most Martin way possible and then asks if Malcolm would kill him. We see as Malcolm focuses on the things in the room that would do the job, his pencil, the guard's baton. He tells Martin that he couldn't kill him. And I would like to draw your attention to the look on Martin's face when Malcolm says that. He is curious. This moment leads me to think that Martin thinks that Malcolm is capable of killing. It's almost like Martin is seeing what we see Malcolm focus on, and he is curious about why Malcolm would deny it. Back to the present, Ainsley is now going to be reporting from the studio, which of course makes Jessica very happy. Malcolm tells them about his vacation of staying indoors, and Jessica reminds him how staying away from his father has been good for his health, and Malcolm agrees. Though there is still unfinished business left between them, like how Martin tried to kill his son. Malcolm asks what she would be doing after the meal, and Jessica lies about running errands, and obviously Malcolm catches the lie. There is a man with information about the girl in the box, and Jessica is going to meet him. Malcolm tags along. They go to the location, and inside the carousel is a dead body. Malcolm calls the team, and they find out that whoever killed the man wanted Jessica to find the body. Somewhere during this, Jessica's purse goes missing, which comes into play later in the episode. Idrissa was the cutest in this scene, and Jessica's reaction on seeing Idrissa and Malcolm is priceless. Ainsley gets a call from the killer, who is calling himself the Carousel Killer. Ainsley tries to take an ethical stand on the topic of putting a serial killer on live TV, but the killer threatened to kill more people should they not comply. So Ainsley goes on air and gets someone to call Gil. Gil walks in on Danny interviewing Jessica and Malcolm and turns on the TV to Ainsley's interview. The killer calls Jessica a fraud and a hypocrite, and Ainsley instantly gets protective of Jessica. He tells them that he wants the money that Jessica offered for information about the girl in the box. Jessica starts blaming herself for the murder of the man on the carousel. Well, at least we know where Malcolm gets that from. Like mother, like son. Jessica wants to pay the $1 million so that no one else dies, but Gil informs her that the police do not cooperate with extortionists. And then Jessica almost says the F word, and Malcolm interrupts her at just the right time so that the show can maintain its PG-13 rating. At Claremont, Martin is sculpting something into clay, if you can call it that, and it's TV time. He asks for a knife, and can I just say, Mr. David? A round of applause for this man. He has been tolerating Martin for 20 years. What a legend. Back at the station, Malcolm gives a profile on the killer. The obvious conclusion is that it is someone that the Whitleys wronged and hence has come back for revenge. Now that is a long list. Malcolm tells them to start from some brothers, I forgot their name. Gil orders Danny and Malcolm to go to Ainsley's news center. Jessica changes her mind about going home and decides to pay the ransom instead. At the news station, Malcolm is mansplaining interviewing to Ainsley, and she's not having any of it. She went to Colombia. While they are waiting for the killer to call, Martin calls Ainsley's news station. He tells her he wants to help, just in case there are any NYPD consultants out there who might need it. He calls Jessica his wife, and Ainsley instantly corrects him, saying ex-wife. He tells her how he doesn't think that the killer is motivated by money. Instead, his motivation is dun 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 dun, Martin, which from a psychopathic narcissistic POV, sure, why not? Martin thinks that the killer is connected to one of his alleged victims. Dude, you went to prison for it. It's not alleged anymore. And Ainsley says that much, and Martin is being cheeky, saying it just has such a nice ring to it. Malcolm tells Ainsley to ask why Martin thinks the money doesn't matter. Martin explains that the killing is like a performance, and that it's a distraction. Ainsley asks him what he thinks the killer really wants, and Martin, being Martin, says his phone time is over. It's unclear whether he did it because he didn't know the answer or because he simply didn't want to give it, or maybe his phone time was actually over. Right after it, the killer calls. He comments how it is just like a Whitley to take advantage from the misfortune of others. Ainsley tells him that he can't really judge since he is the one with the killer in his name. Malcolm tells Ainsley how the victim wasn't random, and Ainsley conveys that much to the killer. He tries to tell her where to have her mother drop the money, and Ainsley gets mad and tells him that either he answer her question or she is going to cut to advertisement and he was not going to get his money. The killer tells her that the victim was an accomplice and gives her the instructions of where to drop the money. Malcolm calls Jessica asking about where she first met Martin and realizes that she is going to pay the money. Here, Jessica tells him he's left me no choice. This theme occurs multiple times during this episode, first with the news lady and now Jessica. Jessica goes to give the money and the killer asks her to empty the bag on the street, and she does, but he kills the man either way. Gil is around as everyone around Jessica starts panicking, picking up the money. The whole thing honestly reminded me of the Joker movie, with the kill the rich vibe. Malcolm and Gil send Jessica home, and Malcolm decides to go visit his father. Meanwhile, Jessica's purse, which was lost at the carousel, is back in her car with a phone call and a photo. The killer instructs Jessica to go to Martin and kill him. Malcolm asks his father about the man that was killed, but Martin doesn't know anything. Malcolm thinks that the victim might be related to Martin's alleged kills. Martin starts acting like, Martin, and frustrated, Malcolm starts to leave just as Jessica arrives. Malcolm looks ashamed at having visited his father again. He's caught up in himself, and it takes him a while to realize that Jessica is displaying stress reactions. He quickly deducts Jessica's plan to kill Martin and talks her out of it. Jessica pulls out the photo of the woman the killer had kidnapped, and Martin recognizes her and realizes who the other victim is. They deduce that the killer is not trying to get revenge for one of the killings he did as a killer, but for someone who died at Martin's day job as a doctor. I find it really interesting that Martin actually followed the Hippocratic Oath, which further goes to show how serial killers might think of themselves as two different identities: the doctor who followed the letter of the law and, the serial killer. Martin tells Jessica and Malcolm about the 3 people he saved that week and that maybe he is a good person. Malcolm tells him that he is not. Then he goes on to tell Jessica about how Martin wanted to kill him. Martin pauses for a second and admits to having planned to kill Malcolm, but he couldn't go through with it. He says that not killing Malcolm was his choice. Now, I don't know if this is going to come into play later or something, but the whole episode has been about choice. In the flashback, choosing if and how Martin and Malcolm could kill each other, in present time whether or not Malcolm was going to visit his father. Ainsley's arc about whether or not they should even air a serial killer making demands. The news lady saying they didn't have a choice. Jessica saying she has to fulfill the demands of the killer, saying she has no choice. The killer making Jessica choose between someone's life and $1 million. Jessica at the hospital with whether or not she should kill Martin. All throughout the episode, people have said that they didn't have a choice, and this is the only time when anyone said that they chose to do something. Anyway, with them running out of time, Martin suggests that if the killer told them to kill him, then maybe they should kill him. While Martin is trying to convince Malcolm why he should do it, he kind of raises his voice very suddenly, and Malcolm's reaction is noteworthy. Fans are speculating that "come on boy" might be trigger words that Martin used on Malcolm when he was young to get him to do things, and this is why Malcolm twitches like that. To me, it also kind of read like how when someone is in deep thought and someone suddenly yells and they lose balance and get irritated for a second. Martin reminds Malcolm of the place where you can pierce the heart and still live, and notes how Malcolm's hand is steady. Contrast that with how much his hand was shaking during the break-in episode where they had to do surgery on Jin. This could be a hint about how Malcolm deep down is like Martin, a killer. But it can also be read as Malcolm might be ready to kill someone, but only if that person is Martin. Especially after the flashback that followed about how if you miss even a little, that man could die. And with Martin's fate still hanging in the balance, I like to see how this goes. Despite the fact that I'm 99% sure Martin isn't dying. They catch the killer who is impersonating a nurse. They have this talk about how the killer thinks that the Whitleys were happy after, but they are not. It is that moment of realization that someone else has just as much of a life as you do. That they have gone through just as much pain as you have, if I'm making any sense. The best case scenario where Martin quote-unquote sacrifices himself for his family. If he really did try to kill Malcolm, then he is trying to apologize, sort of, for it in his own way. And if he didn't, then he's just kind of being selfless. But that is the best case. The worst case scenario would be that Martin orchestrated all of this. We know that he, to a certain extent, has influence in the outside world. We also know that he is an alpha who needs a beta to pass down the knowledge, as it were. His primary beta has been Malcolm throughout the whole series, and when Malcolm isn't there, he goes after a patient or a prisoner. I don't know when it started. We know that he orchestrated the crimes in the first episode to get Malcolm to visit him, but the plan about him breaking out. Maybe somewhere near the Ainsley interview episode, realizing how much he missed the outside world and deciding he wanted out. So maybe he got in touch with another one of his betas, John Watkins, but that went south really quickly. However, I don't think that's the case. Martin has always wanted someone to quote-unquote follow him like a puppy, and Malcolm has been doing that throughout the season. Despite leaving him multiple times, Malcolm just seems to come back. Malcolm is Martin's primary beta, and he can't lose that. So he will stay where he is. Yes, he might be restricted to some things, but overall, it isn't bad if he gets to see his son. Either way, I would like to see an episode with Martin out in the world. So much has changed since the last time that we knew he was out. I'd love to see him react to the city and the world as a whole after all the digitization. Well, at least we made it through one episode where Malcolm isn't in immediate physical danger. Subscribe to my channel for more Prodigal Son content. Like this video if you liked it. and I'll see you next time. Sending love. Toodles!